When I was at Cal State Long Beach, I was the head of their entrepreneurship program. And also at Cal State Northridge, I was the head of their entrepreneurship program. And at Chapman University, I was the director of our Leatherby Center for Entrepreneurship and the vice chancellor for entrepreneurship. So what I saw was a really good combination for collaborations. You have basically young individuals who have a lot of enthusiasm, they have optimism, they have hopes, they have high dreams. And I'm thinking to myself, these students, their characteristics, their attitudes are exactly the same as individuals that are starting up a business. No matter what your age is when you're starting up a business, you have a lot of enthusiasm, you have a lot of hope, optimism. And by building a bridge, what we were doing is saying students want to get experience in addition to memorizing a textbook, reading a book, taking exams. So I started a consulting class at Chapman University at the undergraduate level and also at the MBA level. And I saw that there was a need, especially for startups where you have limited cash. You can't afford a professional consultant. You can't afford the billing rate. Also, with a lot of these startups, you can't really afford the marketing research. So what we did in the consulting classes, we said, okay, students want experience. They want something to put on their resume, something to put in on their LinkedIn profiles. And these startups, they need talent. And in addition to talent, we could talk about other resources that universities could provide. So this is how I got started. And myself, I was also an entrepreneur. I was involved with some startups in consulting and also real estate and other import exports. So I saw from a firsthand perspective the challenges you face as an entrepreneur. You have limited time, you have limited space, you have limited cash. And by partnering with universities, you're able to leverage the resources that a university can provide.
Right. Yeah. So, Dr. Shukla, from your vantage point, why is the university startup partnership especially relevant in today's innovative economy where the startup founders wants to collaborate with universities? So, from your vantage point, give us some input on that.
Right. So I think, if anyone has seen the rate of technological change over the last 20, 30 years has accelerated exponentially. And most other institutions are not keeping up with the technology. So if you look at government, you look at traditional industries. But education has as part of their mission, they need to stay current with new technologies, new ideas, new management approaches, because they're preparing their students to be managers of the future. So again, I think what happens is that when you have a lot of technological change, our students are used to technology. They're used to working with technologies. They accept new change. Whereas if you work in a large Fortune 500 company, you sometimes have employees who have a resistance to try something new. They don't want to try some new software, some new app, some new technology. But the students are eager to try. They want to learn. They want to explore, experiment. And this is why I think universities are a prime location for collaborations.
Right. So, Dr. Shukla, we are going to, or I'm going to ask you next 2 to 3 questions about understanding the value of collaboration for the next 5 minutes. Let's talk about it. So, why should early stage startup considering partnering with university, especially when operating on a tight resources?
Right. So I think what happens is that with the startups, I've worked with the consulting class in supervising teams where we worked at startups at all phases. So you might have someone who just says, I have a business idea, I have a business concept, but I don't have any clue. I don't have time to do a complete competitor analysis or SWOT analysis or proof of concept or marketing research. So we could help individuals at that stage of growth where all they have is an idea. Now, if you already have a website, you already have started, but you don't have sales, we could do assessments of what is your website looking like? What are the positives, negatives, competitor assessment, recommend the marketing mix of 4Ps, product, place, price, promotion. If you've already started sales, but you reach some sort of plateau and you're not sure why, we could help at that point where we could assist in terms of trying to understand, okay, what are your benchmarks with the prime competitors. How is the industry growth going? Why is it other competitors are growing and you're not growing in sales and revenue and profits? Now, even if you're a late stage organization, we could assist you with our student teams and consulting. It was interesting when I was teaching the consulting class at the MBA level, undergraduate level at Chapman. I announced to our president of the university, President James Doty at the time, that we have this class and we're looking for real world projects. So, I'm thinking, he has a lot of contacts. So he announced it to the board of trustees at Chapman University. So on our trustees, we're fortunate we have very successful business leaders, community leaders. So we had some billionaires, $1 billion, in revenue companies, and they're asking our teams to consult. And, they obviously had the resources, professional consultants, but they were surprised, some of our trustees, that the quality of work done by students, even if you have a professional consulting organization. And I think the reason I attribute that success is that a lot of these companies, you are targeting younger individuals. So if your target market is 18 to 34-year-old individuals, these consulting organizations, the big four accounting firms and others, they come in, their consulting team members may be average age 40, 45. Our students, by being younger, they may have less experience consulting, but they understand the target market a lot more. They understand social media a lot more. So I think this is where we could assist firms at any stage. And I've worked as a consultant, as an advisor with companies at all stages, even going public and even exit strategies, liquidating, selling.
Great. And when a startup is trying to engage with the talent, be it intern, researchers, faculty at the university, what are the best ways for a startup to access the student talent? Internship, capstone project, part-time hires. How will it work?
No, I think, a combination of approaches would, reach the students. Now, what the listeners, viewers have to recognize is that you have different levels of campuses. So the UC campus, you have a real good talent pool of graduate students, scientific individuals, engineering, technical, computer science, biomed. So if you're looking for that level of talent, then the UC system and California University, California system, you have research institutions. If you're looking for undergraduate students to do some entry level, lower skilled work, so let's say, for example, you need a social media manager. That doesn't really require a master's degree or a PhD, but someone who's familiar and experienced. Now, if you're looking for technical skills on sort of like a job floor, graphic arts designer, web developer, you could go to a community college and get the talent. So the first thing is recognize what talent skills are you looking for, what job positions, duties are you trying to fill. Then once you decide that, with all of these campuses, they usually have a entrepreneurship program, or if they don't have an entrepreneurship program, they have a small business institute, small business development center, or they have a work development activity program. And contact the director of those groups, and they could assist you. The other way is with each of these campuses, if you go to their website, do a search on the website, student organizations. And you'd be surprised, Chapman University, we only have like 8,000 undergraduate students, but we have 300 clubs and organizations. So, for example, one club or organization would be Public Relations Student Association. So let's say you want to do a press release, you want to send out some information. Those students would volunteer to do that as a project or do it, individually or as a group. If
Right.
we have a marketing student association, they're interested in doing marketing research. At Chapman, we have a consulting student organization, so they're looking for real projects. So contact the students. You could get their contact information from the website, and they would give you, in terms of the approach, how you could further communicate in terms of a meeting or face-to-face or by email.
Right. So, Dr. Shukla, it is quite obvious that, there is a slew of expertise available into the university and the college system that we have here in the US. Now, the challenge is how can a startup attract the top student talent when they can't pay competitive salaries? if they want to hire somebody full time.
Right.
How the needle will move, what will attract a top notch student talent to work for a startup?
Right. So I think, a couple of things. One is that a lot of students, when they're undergraduates or juniors, sophomores, seniors, what they're more interested in is something to gain experience and exposure and to put on their resume, LinkedIn profile. It's not so much they're looking for a full-time paycheck and they're
Mhm.
not looking for the highest part-time paycheck. So that is something that you could offer. Now, one way to attract that interest is many colleges and universities offer internship academic credit, where if a student works 40 hours over a semester or over a 10-week quarter, if the student works 40 hours, they could get 1 unit semester towards graduation. If they work 120 hours over 15 weeks, they could get 3 units of credit. So students like that because one, it helps them towards graduation. And two, it shows up on their transcript as a pass, no pass. It's not a letter grade. But then recruiters who look at the transcript, they see that this student actually wanted to do more than just go to a classroom, take exams, memorize the vocabulary, but they actually wanted to apply their concepts. That, and I think with a lot of these startups, if you could give the students a referral letter recommendation, serve as a reference, if you serve as a mentor, all of that is highly appreciated, much more than the money and the compensation.
Wow, that is a great point. Thanks for bringing it out. Two more questions regarding the engaging with the talent. How do startups benefit from working with the faculty or the university researcher? Are they the best practices for approaching them, and how a startup can approach those high-end researcher and university faculties?
Right. So I think, a couple of approaches with the faculty, again, it varies by the levels. So if you're looking at a UC campus, University of California, a lot of the faculty are primarily focused on research. So they want to partner with industries, startups, where you have something which is state of the art and they could tie that into their existing research. Now, you also have business faculty who are interested in doing case write ups. So you could approach the business faculty and say, I have an interesting company. We've struggled with some milestones and some hurdles, but we've overcome them. This is an interesting story that your students might be interested in and others in reading about. So if you approach a business faculty member and offer that you're willing to serve as a guest speaker or you're willing to serve as a mentor, that helps. And the other thing that business faculty members are looking for is hands-on class projects. So I've worked with some startups where we worked with the CEO of the company, with the co-founders, and then they come in, they give a guest talk to the class. Then students are broken up into groups of 3 or 4, and the students work on a consulting project. Then they submit that to the CEO, the founders. 2 weeks later, after it's submitted, the CEO comes in, gives their assessment of what the students did. Students really enjoy that. The faculty enjoy that. It's a win-win for everyone, and that's the approach. The other way I would suggest is that you want to network like everything else in business and entrepreneurship. Go to the events. Every campus, they list events on their website. And especially if there's an entrepreneurship center, they have a lot of good workshops. They have great guest speakers. They have local leaders. And a lot of these individuals might turn out to be potential advisory board members, board of director members. They could potentially be angel investors. They might have contacts to venture capitalists. So you never know by attending these. Definitely bring a lot of business cards, have your 30-second pitch, 15-second pitch ready, and be able to explain who you are, what you're doing, and why you're there.
Let's talk about the role that a PhD candidate or the research assistant play in an early stage startup. What have you seen working, what has not worked, and how to approach them?
Right. So a lot of our PhD candidates, we're bringing in sort of like the best minds around the world. So in the United States, higher education is fortunate because a lot of our current PhD students in business, engineering, and the sciences, biomed, computer science, Many of them are international students and they have great talent, they have great skills. The problem is with their international student visa, they're limited to what they could do in terms of paid compensation off campus. Now, what they are interested in is when they finish their education, they finish their PhD or their master's in engineering or MBA degree, they're interested in practical training. And eventually they hope to get a H-1B visa sponsor. So the way to approach a PhD candidate or student is to say, we have an opportunity, we've seen your research, we've seen your thesis, your dissertation, and we see potential synergies and mutual benefits. And when you finish the degree, we'd like to offer you an opportunity to get practical training experience. Now, the students are not international students. They're not limited to working off campus or not. So you could approach PhD students who are not on a international student visa and say that we have a lab and we're working on an extension and we have newer equipment, more so than what your campus provided. And we'd like to have you join our team as a research scientist or data analyst or as a contributor, collaborator. So I think, there's a lot of potential there, especially in the sciences, the technology fields, high tech. And we've seen successful examples of that with the UC system, working with a lot of the biomed companies and computer science. We've seen the success with the UCs and Berkeley, Stanford, working with Silicon Valley.
Wow. So great. So great. So let's talk about the beyond talent, what the university has to offer to startup founders. Access to labs, IP, grants, anything else. So, the question is, how can a startup tap into the university infrastructure like labs, incubator, and test facilities?
Research and development support, access to labs and equipment, which we talked about, joint research grants with like the National Science Foundation, technology transfer offices, business development resources like a startup incubator, accelerator. And Chapman University, we're fortunate, we're representing Orange County with the California Accelerate California Inclusive Innovation Hub. So it's open to any startup in Orange County. Similarly, they have a incubator hub in LA County, Riverside County, San Bernardino County. So those resources, you're paying for them through the state taxes. You may as well take advantage of those resources. Some of the campuses, they offer a business plan contest, which is open not just to students and groups on campus, but to anyone in the community. So Chapman University, we have a business plan contest open to anyone in Orange County. We also have facilities. A lot of these universities, they offer co-working spaces. They have offices. So if you're a startup, you don't really have a formal boardroom. And, if you want to impress a potential client, potential partner, it's not that impressive to show them your garage and say, this is where we're at. But you could use one of the conference rooms at the entrepreneurship centers. That would help. And then, like we talked about, networking and the events, it's a great opportunity because if you're sitting in your office 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, you make phone calls, you do introductions, emails, that is not going to impress a lot of individuals compared to having face-to-face meetings in person at these networking events. And I know you've been involved with TIE, and universities partner with groups like TIE. We have Tech Coast Angels, we have other angel investor groups, venture capital groups. And a lot of these universities, they host these groups, the Young Presidents Organization, YPO. So network with these organizations. The other thing, on the list that was interesting, I didn't think about, but ChatGPT caught it, was brand association and credibility. So it creates endorsement, partnership, joint press releases. And one suggestion I would offer is the founders of the startup, start with your alma mater because they want to brag about your success because your success adds credibility to the institution. So if you have like 4 team members besides the founder, contact each of the team members and say, contact the Alumni Association director of your campus. Let them know this is what we're doing. This is a stage that we're at. And they'll put it in their newsletters. They'll put it on their website. And they want to encourage their success of the alumni. So that would be a great starting point. So as you can see, there's a lot of resources. It's not just simply the talent and access to students.
Yeah. Another question on this topic, Dr. Shukla, what is the typical process of gaining access to the university-held IPs or intellectual property? If a startup founder comes to know that, hey, Chapman has this IP, how they can access it, what is the process for that?
Right. So I think each university is different in terms of their approach. But I know I'm familiar with the UC system where the UCs in the past 30, 40 years ago, they were primarily reliant upon state funding. And they made a conscious effort at the UC system, the chancellors, the presidents, that for the graduate programs, and especially in STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, they want to create revenue centers by licensing the new developments, IP, royalties, fee arrangements, technology transfer arrangements. So most campuses, they have one individual or one central department. And I know, for example, UCI, they had a innovation hub, that the Cove, and other campuses have similar centers. Contact the director and basically say that we want to explore a little bit more. What is your IP? What sort of licensing arrangements do you have? What contractual constraints do you already have towards exclusive use? And a lot of that will involve legal assistance at some point. So when you sign the agreement with the university, definitely you'll have to get legal support to review the contract and make sure everything is mutually beneficial. The mistake I've seen with some individuals is they want to rush into a contract and they're not fully aware, or they fully didn't understand the commitments that they were making to the university or the constraints they would have on the use of the technology. So definitely involve a lawyer in reviewing the document before you finalize.
Right. Great point, Dr. Shukla. Are there any grant opportunities that the startup can jointly pursue with the academic partners, be it a university or college?
Right. So I think, there are some funding opportunities. We talked about one business plan contest, which are open, and many of those have prize awards, cash prize awards. You also have like Chapman University with the California Accelerate Inclusive Incubation Hub. We received a $250,000 state of California grant where we could recommend some of our startups in our incubator for funding. And I believe the amount varies by category, but let's say 10,000, 15,000. That may not seem like a lot to $1 billion company in sales revenue. But if you're a startup and you just want to, show one that someone else believes in our idea, and if you get a $15,000 state grant, that basically could convince investors that it's sort of proof of concept. You wouldn't get state grant unless someone believes that you have a good idea. So we have programs such as that. In the past, I was working with the federal government, and they had a advanced technology program, ATP. So it's more for established firms, and they're involved in defense and bioengineering and others and tech. But what they would do is they would have companies who would say, apply for federal funding. And a lot of that also, you could collaborate with the university because they understand the grant process. They have grant writers. And instead of you're trying to master grant writing, you could basically work with a university partner and they can assist you.
So true. Now, in the next segment, let's talk about the best practices and pitfall. What are some of the best practices you have observed in how startups approach and maintain university relationships?
Right. I think the main thing is to recognize it's like any relationship, it's supposed to be a two-way street. If you go to a university and say, we want to use your facility for free, we want to get your student talent and not pay them, we want to have your faculty members have projects related to our company, but we are not going to benefit you, then I think, you're not going to get anywhere. What you want to do is to show that what the university cares, how are students benefiting from the partnership? So you want to show students will get guest speakers who will talk about what's happening in industry, what's happening today in May, June 2025. Students will learn a lot more than just reading a textbook or listening to the professor. The second way is that universities care about placement of their graduates. So our company right now is small, But our plan, once we get the funding and $1 million in investments, we're going to be looking for 5 full-time employees. We're going to go later to 10 and 50. Employers attract the university interest because they have the career development center. They want to see the students getting placed. The other thing is to try to work with the deans of the various schools. So if you're primarily working with the business school dean, work with them. If it's more technology-based, engineering school dean or computer science school dean. And what the deans care about is university partnerships and assisting, especially the alumni. So the best practices would be contact the deans, contact the entrepreneurship center directors, find out who are the faculty members teaching entrepreneurship courses, who are the faculty members teaching marketing research, and approach them, but make it mutually beneficial.
Right, great. And now let's turn the table. What are the challenges that the universities are facing in finding the right partners when it comes to startup partnerships?
Right. So I think, anyone who's following the news and what's trending, universities are under a lot of change, both external at the federal level, state level. So their, approach with a lot of universities is, okay, let's not try anything new, no new initiatives, no new hiring of staff, and just sort of put a freeze on any agreements. So I think that's one of the challenges you face is until universities get a better sense as to what their funding levels are going to be, what their enrollments are going to be, what international student application pools are going to look like. A lot of universities might be hesitant to start anything new at this point. The other thing is there's a big difference I've noticed in my experience working at both public and private universities is that public universities tend to be a little bit slower, less innovative. And part of that is that they're guaranteed state funding. So even if they're not innovative, they're going to be given the state funding. With the private universities like Chapman University, out of 3,000 colleges and universities in the US, we're in the top 50 as the most innovative university based on US News and World Report. And I think what makes private universities more innovative is that they have a tuition-driven model and they need to attract students. They need to offer new programs, new services, new degrees. And they also need to attract donors to reduce the dependence on tuition. So working with a private university tends to be much faster. The other problem, unfortunately, with public universities is you have unions for faculty members. Private universities cannot have a faculty union. There was a US Supreme Court decision where they basically ruled that private university faculty are sharing in the governance of the university. So therefore, you can't have a union of faculty members at Chapman University or Stanford or USC. So the faculty at private universities are more receptive to do things and volunteer and assist with startups. Unfortunately, some of the public universities, the faculty members are, I have a union, I'm going to get my COLA, cost of living adjustment, even if I don't volunteer to do anything. So those things you want to keep in mind.
Right. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Shukla. Now let's talk about your role in the entrepreneurship area of the local ecosystem of Orange County, LA County, and how you can help startup founders and what type of startup founders should reach out to you.
Right. So basically, I have a consulting firm where I've assisted primarily with the CPIM certified in planning and inventory management. I have a lot of experience in efficiency, operations, supply chain management, logistics, distribution, improving quality, improving customer service, customer retention. So I assist as a consultant individually. I have associates. And also with the students, we could have, basically students gaining experience. I've also served as a advisory board member for businesses, startups, and I've also served on the board of directors of organizations. Also, besides the for-profit, I assist community organizations, nonprofits, and assisting them. And I think, like the term that you use, ecosystem, and I think that's what's important here, is recognize that you may feel alone as a startup. You may feel like, okay, I don't have a strong team. I don't have a large team. But once you connect with other entrepreneurs and individuals who will serve as a mentor and offer guidance, then I think, that makes you feel more of a team member with the group. And you feel, I think, much more confident that there's a team assisting you. It's not just you against the world and you against the competitors in the industry.
For you, for a startup founder to reach out to you, the email is the best way to reach you, or we have
Right. So, yeah, I made it real easy. Long time ago at Chapman University, I got the email innovate@chapman.edu. So that makes it a lot easier. So if you send me an email, innovate@chapman.edu, that'll directly go to me. That was when I was the vice chancellor for entrepreneurship. I've also created a website. I was one of the earlier ones when they had websites. So I have a website, pkshukla.com, and that has some information. And I received an award from CO organization nonprofit as the best advisor globally. So I created a website just recently called bestcoadvisor.com, but any of those approaches could, certainly work.